Okay, welcome everybody to our panel today. My name is Anna Rodewald. I have the honor to have 3 guests today for our discussion. It's a bit more, it's like a talk between experts on the question, how can nature lead us in design? I'm working with performance days since a while, and I've always asked, hey, what kind of topic do you want to talk about this time? And I said, hey, we have so many topics which we talked about the last years, and honestly, I'm a textile person by heart, but I'm also a nature person by heart. And I thought, hey, how can we bring these topics together? How can we have nature lead us? How can design and producing products being a dance where the nature is in lead? How can we use all these patterns and tools, what we see in nature, what nature provides us when we are thinking about designing new products, services, systems, whatever? And to answer that question, I asked 3 experts from 3 different areas to help me in this talk. Ladies first, we have Kjersti from Design 2025 from Norway. She is a wool expert. She will have the head of wool as a raw material also being used in the functional area. Then we have Sanne working with cotton, a lot in India, working with farmers, very deep to the fact of seeds. And then we have online David from an organization called Land to Market. They also work with farmers, but they mainly work on with partners who are working with animals. So he is in the wool as well as in the leather topic. So welcome to all 3 of you. And probably we start with first a short introduction of the 3 of you, what you're working on and about your organization. Starting with David, going the other way around. Welcome, David. You see a bit of our audience here. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what Land to Market mean? Because probably some of our audience have not heard about your organization.
So, thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. So I'm David Amar. I'm responsible for the business development of Land to Market in Europe. Land to Market was created by the Savory Institute in the US. After working for several decades with farmers and ranchers all around the world, there came a moment where a lot of brands were wishing to source from regenerative farms, and where a lot of farmers were willing to work with people that were actively looking for their materials. Hence the name Land to Market was really trying to build a bridge and offer a sourcing solution. It's also in the same time the first verification label for soil regeneration and soil health. Try to make it short, I don't know how much time I have.
Thank you, David. We go further with questions later on, so we have 45 minutes left, which give us enough time. Sanne.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Sanne with Raddis Cotton, and what we do, we work in India, South India. We are working directly with smallholder tribal cotton farmers, especially focusing on women. And our take to it is that, of course, cotton, we all know it as a culprit, water guzzling, pesticide consuming, but it all depends on how cotton is being grown. Cotton can be grown rain-fed, multi-cropped with all kinds of other crops, in systems that rejuvenate the soil and bring back biodiversity, while at the same time creating a reliable income for smallholder farmers. So that is our inspiration, to really turn something around and creating a positive footprint, a positive impact by doing agriculture in a different way. So yeah, for us that is cotton, and we are setting up long-term partnerships with our partners, and we have Claudia from Lessig as one of our dear partners, where we really believe in long-term collaborations. If we talk about regeneration or even organic, it's not one season you do it and the other season you don't. But it's about much more than just regenerating the soil. It's also about creating those right partnerships together. So thank you.
Thanks, Sanne. Coming to Kjersti and her wool love.
Yeah. I'm Kjersti Kviset. I come from Norway, and my background is actually a product designer, furniture designer, and I had a dream to become a very famous designer, have a studio in New York, always be dressed in black, and being dressed in black is more or less the only thing I reached. And because I worked in the furniture industry, and I was quite early came across something about environmental management, and I felt that this is something for me. So I found my passion, and working with that out of product design, from the product level, which I think is very crucial. So after leaving the furniture industry, I started 2025 design because I wanted to work for the future, and now we're nearly there. You're all excited about the future in 2 years, something. So, and I work a lot with designers, with the topic design. So I'm a consultant in circular design and circular strategies, and I've been working with circularity in design since 30 years, and very much inspired by cradle-to-cradle design, and I happen to observe that both David and Sanne also come from the same background of falling in love with the philosophy of cradle-to-cradle design. And at some point, like 10 years ago or even more, I stumbled across some sheep in Norway, and I fell in love again, which is really, really nice. So I work with the wool industry, with wool brands, with the global wool, with the supply chain. Yeah, I'm a little bit here and a little bit there. I'm like maybe like a black sheep.
Okay, we don't take the definition of a black sheep in the German language for that. So thank you, all three of you. And you might wonder why I invited people talking about agriculture if we are here at the functional textile fair. So it's a performance days where we want to talk about outdoor fabrics and functional fabrics. And for me, it really belongs together, because we know that most of the fabrics we are using right now are still crude oil based. So it's fossil fuel which we are using to produce our raw materials. And more of the innovation, what we see here, if we are running around through all the brands and boosters, are talking about more sustainable material, biodegradable material, bio-based material. And if we want to have products made from materials which are coming from our soil, we need to also think about the soil. We need to think about how do we treat our soil? How can we make sure that the basis of what we want our materials to grow on is healthy? Otherwise we won't have healthy materials, otherwise we don't have yields, otherwise we won't have enough material, because we cannot switch 1 million tons of fossil fuel into 1 million tons of regenerative material just by that. It's a product, it's a raw material which is coming from an agricultural background, which has a different dynamic. That's the one thing. And the other thing is I invited specifically this experts as they bring the focus from different angles. Not only one type of raw material, but different types of raw material which can help us in functional clothing. And I believe that if we have healthy raw materials coming from healthy soil, we will also have healthy products. Healthy products means products which will be loved by the end consumer, which will be worn long, will be taken care about. And then at the end, hopefully, can go back into a natural cycle, hopefully, or at least in a technical cycle, in a way that it doesn't harm the soil and the nature again. So that's a bit of background on why we have this panel here today. And I talked with all three of the panelists before, and at the end we came with all of three on the topic of soil. And that's something, probably we start with Sanne. I talked a lot with Sanne about how your farm, the farmers you are working with, taking care about the land. What is their approach and what is their mindset towards the land they are working with?
Yeah, so we really consider farmers as stewards of the land, stewards who also take care of biodiversity, take care of water management, and indeed it all starts with the soil. So if we don't invest in making sure that the soil is healthy, replenished, rejuvenated, the soil has also an enormous capacity, potential to even take back the carbon, sequester carbon, and really make sure, like you say, that the starting part is a healthy and a rejuvenating part. And if we can do that, then it's even possible to restore soils that have already lost their fertility or that have already started to decline, and to really reverse that process. I think that's a really interesting part where we indeed all have the commonality of cradle to cradle, and cradle to cradle talks about less bad isn't good enough. And if you look at nature, then we can really think about systems that can restore itself. But of course we have to make that possible.
David, also our discussion was a lot about soil, and I learned a lot from you about how land to market approach, also with the background of Rodewald and Yassasree, is looking into the relationship of the humans working with soil, with ground, with land, and the material which is coming out of that.
Yeah, it's you know, I just want to start by saying something, because I don't think I will have this opportunity again. But I was just looking a few days ago in my first Cradle to Cradle files, and I realized that Kjersti had created the first keynote presentation I used to study Cradle to Cradle. So I just wanted to extend my gratitude to her work. And so to get back to land to market, you know, to set some context here, and I'd like to share two quotes. One from Cradle to Cradle: design is the first signal of human intention. And so it's really important to understand what is our intention, what do we want to create. And the second, I was just reading, this is Covering Ground. It's the first magazine from Land to Market. And you can get it from our website. There's an article from Kelsey Kirsten, who is the scientific director of the EOV program, that stands for Ecological Outcome Verification. And she shares a quote from an American philosopher in her article that says, "Nature is not blind and dumb, nature is eloquent. Human science is blind and dumb if it does not hear this eloquence." And this is really what Alan Savory was trying to achieve when he first started working with animals, is to understand how, by mimicking nature, we could recreate the patterns of large herbivores on grasslands. And by doing so, he realized that it was not the animals that were desertifying and degrading lands, but the way we manage them. And that has been going on for some centuries in some areas of the world. But we can see that when animals are managed properly, within a few years, you can regenerate a piece of land. And this is really the work that we're trying to do, is how can we make sure that the wool you are sourcing is coming from farms, from ranches that have been regenerating this land.
So you are asking, how can we do that? I would give that question back and say, how do you do that?
So it's, we talked about this, and when we really want to get technical, then we need to bring the technical people on. But it's really to understand how nature works, to understand that if after billions of years of evolution, nature has decided to put animals and plants together to create healthy ecosystems, then we should also think about it. How do we recreate healthy ecosystems? That has been the work of Alan Savory with animals. And although it's not required to practice holistic management to become EOV verified, it's highly recommended. The point is really to bring a feedback loop to the farmers so they can understand how to look at their land, how to look at their landscape and make decisions. It is not a practice-based approach. The EOV stands for ecological outcome verification. We want to measure outcomes. And it's really about measuring what they call the 4 pillars of EOV are the water cycle, the mineral cycle, the energy flow, and community dynamics. And these are all, 4 windows into the same room. They're not looked at separately, but they're really looked at, in unity. How do they work with each other, and what do they tell about each other? And it's not about going to a farm and telling the farmer what he should be doing, but helping them understanding the consequences of the choices he made if he wants to regenerate, and to give him a feedback loop that has, leading indicators that, kind of day to day, is there bare ground, how fast is dung decomposing. There's a lot of different indicators like this, and then there's lagging indicators that you see over the years. But it's really to help the farmers make decision and how and why and when he will move the animals around. And so to kind of summarize the work of Alan Savory is really, we killed most of the big predators on the grasslands of the world. Those predators were dictating the movement of herds and how they would move around grasslands. Now that we've killed all of them, what if land managers were moving their animals on grasslands like animals would if they were predators? And it's to make sure that pastures is never overgrazed, and you can look at all the signs to see when is the right time to move your animals from one paddock to the next paddock. And by doing so over time, you can really increase the ability of the land to grow more grass and more food for more animals, to filtrate and stock more waters, to be a home to more biodiversity, whether it is above the ground or in the ground. And with all this, the ability to sequester more carbon. And so you can avoid drought, you can avoid floods, you can give more resiliency to your supply chain by doing so as well.
You mentioned so many information. I just want to highlight some keywords. My initial question was, how can nature lead us in design? And if we're taking that pattern, I was asking for patterns and tools, the pattern nature has in how to move animals, in that case, from one piece of the land to the next. What you are doing is mimicking that. So also looking that the movement of the animals on the land is following in the natural flow with the goal to restore and to keep nature in a good shape, keep the ground and the soil in a good shape, and having a good harvest, because we are all talking, we are here also with a business view, having a good harvest. And you help your partners, your farmers, with tools to measure this, because some of the things we might not see, which is not obvious, what is the health quality of a soil, we might not see it if we are not trained experts. And this is what we also do in industry. We are measuring, we are taking data for decisions, and want to create systems, create portfolios, product lines, or whatever, which are healthy. So we measure how often can we shift colors, how often can we shift materials, and so on and so on from next season to the other. So this is a pattern which we can take from a natural approach to whatever we do on a day-to-day basis in our industry. The other keyword, what I really saw, was biodiversity or diversity in general. We know that all systems which are monocultures are unstable. They might be highly efficient under specific conditions, in this specific narrow corridor. But if we are talking about on a global scale, monocultures are always more fragile for any kind of disturbance. Nature is always diverse. And if we have diverse systems, like diverse setup of different animals, different grass, types of grass, different crops, or if we have a portfolio which has different product lines, different materials, different styles which are feeding the need of different end consumers or different users, it will make us more stable in our business in general. So this is also one of the patterns where we can see a clear lead from design to whatever we do on a day-to-day practice. And if we ignore that, we all know what happens. If we are focusing only on one type of product, if the market changes because it's not fashion anymore, we're losing a lot of business. And nature always did it in a diverse way. So diversity and taking care about the base, taking care about the soil. Going back to Sanne, we also talked about the social aspect. Diversity is not only one plant and the other next to each other, or the plant or the animal next to each other, but also integrating the ecological and the social topic. Can you tell us a bit more about how you integrate that?
Yeah, sure. So first, indeed, I want to start with saying, and also like you rightly said, Anna, we have to be inspired also by nature on a system level, not to do some cherry picking, maybe what we also see a lot happening in biomimicry. We might take just a simple part that we like a lot and then we start implementing it in our products. But if you look at nature, it's really a system approach, and it works because it works as a system and it has a holistic way of dealing with it. And indeed, if you look at the social component, of course, you cannot see that separate from the whole approach that you're doing. Farmers are only going to be able to take good care of the land if they have those possibilities, if they are, let's say, suppressed by middlemen in vicious circles of debt, with no other way than just spraying that pesticide because they cannot afford to lose another crop. Then of course we have not really created a system that has any kind of solution. So indeed it asks for an approach where human is an integral element, although we often forget that we are, and really try to reach that harmony. And that of course can be done in many different ways, but in the first place that is also realizing the positive impact we as humans can have. And again, it comes from the cradle-to-cradle design philosophy, that instead of looking at humans as a plague, as a pest for this world, how can we be really part of that system? And of course, if we look at smallholder farming systems in India, small communities where there really is still an enormous sense of community, where farmers help each other sowing, help each other harvesting. Yeah, if we can strengthen that, I believe that's when we really start to look at it at a system level and not only do bits and pieces of cherry picking and call it biomimicry.
And the ecological part, you explained me how you combine different plants.
Yeah. So of course, nature is the best teacher or best inspirator, because it has been doing that for many years and years. So indeed, if we look at cotton, it can grow wonderful together with all kinds of different other crops in symbiotic relationships, means they both benefit from each other. It's a win-win. We can have nitrogen-fixing pulses that bring back nitrogen into the air. We can have all kinds of trap crops that take away the pests and diseases that the cotton would normally get. And again, there the community, with all the indigenous wisdom that they have, they know so much about that because it's trialed and tested for centuries even.
Which is a very nice example on how we can integrate the ecological and the social part. And with having different crops and cotton next to each other, it's good for the soil, it's good for the planet, it's good for the harvest, and it's also good for the humans because they are not belonging on one specific product. So if the cotton harvest is not as good, they still have different other products to sell or to feed their families from. And also there, the diversity is a very important thing. And if we want to source cotton, for example, and we know that the farmers are not belonging only on the quality of the weather of this year, of the weather data, and the amount of cotton they produce this year, because we heard about the dramatic situations with cotton farmers, but we know that they can still feed their families even if the quantity of cotton was not that high than it was expected, or the maximum could be. It can help us as brands to know that we have a supply chain which is a bit more stable, which is not as fragile as it would be when it would be only belonging on one type of raw material. And if you as designers or sourcers or sourcing supply chain people looking for this kind of patterns, for this kind of situations in your supply chain, it will help you to make sure that your supply chain is stable in a way, not belonging on one type of product, not belonging on one market, not belonging only on one kind of customer. Kjersti is a wool expert, and Kjersti can teach us so much about wool. I learned so much from her. What is the beauty of wool? If we are talking about functional textiles, because often people think wool is something for other end users. Fashion, probably.
Wool is magic. That's the best thing about wool. And commenting on Sanne and David, it's the sheep are also a very important part of the ecosystem on this planet. They play a very, very pivotal role, and they also have a social role to play. They're giving many small families, farmers, their essential income. They're very good grazers, and they are gifting us wool. They are gifting us their fiber, because we have to share them every year, otherwise they would really be in distress. So it's a good animal welfare means taking care of your sheep and sharing it or combing it, so that they don't have to drag all that long fleece with them all the time. So this is also something that's all very often misunderstood. Sheep have adapted to different climates around the planet. They adapt to climate, to place, to let's say nature. That's the reason why we have very many different sheep fibers. So wool isn't just wool. Where I grew up in Norway, we have coarse wool, strong wool. If you would be so lucky to live in on Iceland, the wool is so strong and thick that you can't hardly, it stands on its own. And if you go to Australia or in the southern hemisphere, you have the finest of the finest, softest merino wool. So this is, it's so diverse. And wool has, because of that, when we use wool for many different things. And well, I grew up with this strong and a little bit itchy wool, which was knitted by my grandma, of course. It's the old stories. Today, we know that the wool we use next to skin is not the strong wool. It's the finest merino, and it is a very, very good performing fiber and material. It has, and especially for performance, for sports, for being outdoor. It has a very good breathability, the moisture wicking, it absorbs a lot of moisture before you get a feeling of being wet. It makes you comfortable, it's like an air conditioner all year round. I wear wool absolutely every day, all year round, no matter what I do, no matter where I am. So that is part of the magic of using wool. And it's very nice to see that wool is kind of being re-established back into sports as well. We always knew that in Norway. All our athletes are wearing wool, and they feel like, oh, this is not so good when they have to race in their synthetic outfits. Then when they are ready with their golden medals, they put back on their wool layers. And it's not easy to explain because you cannot measure this magic. This is that is what is often difficult or a challenge for us in the wool industry, because everyone is asking about numbers and facts and measurements and blah blah and durability and abrasion tests and martingales and all that stuff. Wool is not the strongest, technically not the strongest fiber, but it has the longest emotional durability of all fibers, according to studies. And it's more about the feeling you get when you wear wool. It's about the experience of using it in your sport. So it's very difficult to measure and to document why wool is so good.
And you were talking thanks Kjersti, one very important topic in the very beginning. Wool is given to us by the sheep, and the sheep are doing a lot of eco-services for us. So we as outdoor people, I'm an outdoor person, I'm living in the mountains, and without sheep, the nature would be completely different. So sheep are taking areas clean. They eat the grass, which is helping small villages in the mountains to keep them safe for avalanches, because if the grass is too high, it's like a slope, and then the snow will rush down and will crash into the houses. So the sheep will really help the people to be safe around. They're giving meat and milk if we want, and they are gifting us a material which is again then helping us in sports when we're going out ski touring or hiking or biking or climbing. So it's something which is really close to us. It's a natural relationship, I would say, in that case.
For me, it's also a very important perspective to take that everything that we are gifted from nature, that's a gift that Mother Nature is actually giving it to us, that we can, and we must give something back. While the crude oil products, the synthetics, that is something that we take, we force it out of the planet. So it's a different approach, and I doubt that very much is giving back to Mother Nature in, let's say, in payback for that crude oil. So for me, it's important to work with that, what is given to us. And it's also really important, this is indigenous wisdom from the Americas. And it's also important to remember that in olden times, they used to take not more than half. So take only what is given to you, not more than half of it. Never the first and never the last. So this is an important principle, that we don't overexploit. So that is, well, we all know we've been doing it, so we have to repair. And that's why also these programs, Land to Market and what you're doing, are so important.
That's also a very interesting and helpful idea, pattern, what we can learn from nature. Because you say never the first, never the last. We don't know which one is the last. If we're going around and we're picking whatever, flowers or whatever, we say, hey, this is a very nice flower. We never know whether this is probably the last one of the species. That's why indigenous people always say, never take the first one of something what you see, because it might be the last one which is available in total. And that's something which is a very strong pattern, or which can be like a habit if we are walking around nature and looking into resources. Never take the first and never take the last drop of something. The work with the indigenous people is also something which I found very interesting, but you are spending a lot of time, a lot of effort on in your work, Sanne, and integrating all the knowledge which is with the people since hundreds of generations, or whatever, how long. And often we think we are so scientifically driven, we know that much, we have learned that much, so we need to tell them how to do it. But sometimes we are just blind because we don't have the senses to see what they can see. And the integration, the mix of both, and having both knowledge sets, I would say, the indigenous knowledge and the scientific knowledge of the last, 20 centuries together, being both as valuable as possible, is something which is a very fruitful approach, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, indeed, in the first place, it comes at the realization that even if you look at agricultural science, it's not that old. While this indigenous wisdom, it's really old, tested and proven. And we can really see how, if we think about India, it's the green revolution that came in with pesticides, with fertilizers, with GM seeds, genetic modified cotton seeds. And of course, in the beginning, with great promises, yields would increase and there would be less pests and diseases. And of course, the first 2-3 years, that is the case. But then something happens that just shows that we as humans, we don't really grasp things at a system level. So we somehow could not foresee that we would have super pests and enormous resistance, where that crop that was supposed to be so promising and be so great is now causing enormous problems. It does not have the yield that it was supposed to have. It requires enormous pesticides and fertilizers. And while if we look at the indigenous wisdom as the counterpart, with its variation in crops and its total different approach to doing agriculture, it is far more resilient and resistant against all of this, because it's making use of, like you say, the patterns that we can find in nature, which is go for diversity, don't do monocrop, don't go for one size fits all, look at specific situations, what are your strong points, what are your weak points. So in our case, so we are an Indian-based organization. So me and Nikki, we are the two Dutch people. It's a lot about unlearning what has been tried to, let's say, forcefully implement for the last 20 years. So it's unlearning the use of chemical pesticides or the use of chemical fertilizers, and going back and relying back on that indigenous wisdom that has been there for so many years. But of course, that was put in a different light, maybe even tainted by those with maybe a bit more commercial perspectives. Yeah.
And building the bridge between these two different approaches, that is something which is so important. And that's what makes it for me so fun working on sustainability topics in general, because we are not forced, we are allowed, we are invited to work with so many different disciplines, because the quality in the outcome is the question on how can we build the bridges between the different disciplines. Not only one discipline working as it is once. I was trained as a chemical engineer, and now I'm talking about soil health and indigenous wisdom. And I really love it, because it is it gives me so much more possibilities, so much more tools, so much more, such a wider view. And that's what it makes so fun to work on this kind of topics. Yeah, I could talk about that for ages. But there are two things I really would like to talk about with Kjersti, or one thing I would like to talk with Kjersti about it. We learned now that in the last half hour, it is important to integrate different knowledge bases, different natural systems. We have to unlearn some of that, what we have done the last 20, 30 years. And we also have to see on how can we deal with what we have done the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And when we are talking about sustainable materials, we heard a lot of speeches the last 2 days on recycling, biodegradation, and so on. And wool is one of the materials which is perfectly biodegradable, and if it is treated properly. And we have quite a long history also in recycling this kind of material. But we also see today limitations on what we have done in the last few centuries. And Kjersti dived very deep into that and can tell us a bit more on how we can unlearn here.
Yeah, the wool, well, as long as it's on the sheep, or when we have the greasy wool, it's absolutely readily biodegradable and also recyclable, because it's 100%. And according to the cradle-to-cradle philosophy, we really aim for mono materials. But then we really want to add something, because we want to have more strength, physical durability that is demanded from us. We want to have some more functional, more performance, blends, drapes, anything. And we have to have strong seams. So we add on many different kind of other materials, and a lot of them are synthetics, which make the wool garment not fit neither for the biological cycle nor for the technical cycle as well as it could be. In the fashion world, there is more more mono materials than in the sports world, because they are less dependent on performance and functions. And wool is by studies, by wardrobe studies, and studying clothing collection containers, is the material that stays the longest in our wardrobes for different reasons. It's often a very high-priced garments. We have inherited something, we fall in love with it, and so there are different reasons for why they stay so long, and which is very good. It's a very important point to use what we have as long as we can. But that means that what is coming back now to recycling facilities is 20, 30, maybe even 40 years old, and it contains, among other things, dye stuff that are not longer allowed and that we really don't want to use anymore. And we absolutely don't want them in the recycled materials as well. But now they show up. It's kind of a payback time from these toxic chemicals to come and hit us in the back. And that is really a big challenge. What do we do with all these old, the old stuff that we absolutely would love to recycle, and that is done. But then we discover that it is full of things we don't want to spread more. So it's an interesting discussion we have had a couple of times, Anna, that should we kind of draw a line and say that all the old things, we have to dispose of them in another way, get rid of them, so to speak, and then start anew and wait for the cleaner and the better garments and materials to come back. And this is not only for wool, this is the same for other fibers as well, of course. And when we talk about, so that's one big challenge in the recycling industry. And I also would like to point out, since we are here at the performance days, and you are, probably all of you are into sports and let's say functional, technical garments, that when you blend with wool to make a wonderful functional blend, then be aware that when it comes back to recycling, it might not be that easy to recycle, and it loses value. The more you blend the wool, the less value it has at the end of its life as a new yarn. The more difficult it is to make a new yarn, depending on what kind of fiber you blended with. The seams are still mostly polyesters, so you will have that as a blend as well. And then, oops, David is gone. So it's a lot of things that we still don't know so much about, because the wool we used to recycle, for instance, in Prato, which is a very professional hub or a city for recycling of wool in Italy. And if you like to take a look at examples from Prato, go to the Manteco stand in A6 to take a look. It's really, really beautiful what they can make. But in the sports and performance business, we haven't had any recycling yet. Don't have that tradition. So it's a new field that needs to be discovered, that needs to be tested and explored. And as I work with the recycling of wool, I come across so many stumble stones because of these blends, and because also of the finishing, like the easy care treatments, like a superwash that you put on the surface of the wool to make it washable, tumble dryable, because we think that if we are operating with sports, it needs to be washable and dryable, and it has to be so effective and so modern and so cool, so that I can throw my garments from the outdoor or from training directly into the washing machine on 60 degrees, get rid of the bacteria. But you know, wool doesn't need that, because wool takes care of its bacteria. It doesn't smell like your husband's something we talked about yesterday. And you can wear it for many, many more times without washing, and it washes on cold cycles. So it's so unnecessary. We are over-engineering a lot of what we are doing, instead of saying this is good enough as it is. As it is given from nature, it is perfect as it is. But we keep adding on because we have so high level of expectations. And we think that everything has to be treated the same way. So we are doing a lot of, let's say, kind of damages to the wonderful wool in order to kind of trying it to fit into the expectations. We try to mimic a little bit sometimes the synthetic aspect or the synthetic qualities, while the synthetic area is trying to mimic the natural fibers. They want to be a little bit more like wool. They want to be softer, they want to be breathable, etc. So we are sometimes I see that we are meeting in the middle, the synthetics and the wools. It's an interesting observation. So I would say try always to be as natural and keep the natural good things about the natural fibers before we start to engineer them.
Thank you. That was a very important topic. And you might think, oh no, hey, we have heard so many speeches here the last 2 days on we need to recycle, textile to textile recycling is so important, we need to go back to other resources. And here in Prato, we have 200 years of experience in textile to textile recycling. And then you hear Kjersti saying, yeah, but stop, we have to do something different here. Don't be confused. It's always a question on how we do it. And you as designers, or the ones of you who are designers, you have it in your hand how you design the products of the future. Sure, we need a solution for the stuff which is out there, which we have used and which we have produced the last 200 years, which is coming, or last 50 years with products and byproducts we don't want to have in the system anymore, and we need to find solutions to take them out. That's one topic, and we need to take that or solve it on a technological way. But if we are talking about the future, you as designers, as product managers, you have it in the hand. What are we talking about in performance days in 20 years? Are we still talking about getting rid of old materials and chemicals we don't want to have in the system? Or can we talk about future topics? You have it in your hand how much engineering and how much how to prevent over-engineering, how much technology you put into a garment, what kind of raw materials you use, how to blend them, what kind of end use, how do you design your products for, how specific do you define your end use, what kind of communication do you give to the end consumer on what to do with the product, with the final product, with the jacket, how to care it, how to repair it. Also, the repairability is something what you as designers have in your hand to design into the new product. And that's the positive approach from my end for probably the rest of our panel here before we are opening a few minutes for questions, because there is so much possibility for us as an industry, for us as designers, to shape for a good future, for a future of this industry, using the materials which are here, using materials which are renewable, which we can also work with for a long time, producing products which people love because they are good for them. They are taking care about the product. They really love to do sports with it. They love to wear them. They feel comfortable. That's also a human social aspect, which is important, where we as designers can support with. And I see Charles looking for questions. And we heard really a lot of ideas on how to take systems and patterns we see in nature to lead us in making healthy products out of healthy raw materials, out of healthy systems, out of healthy soil. Doesn't matter whether it's what kind of material it is. I guess that was a bit a short wrap-up before Charles is asking for questions.
Well, more importantly, can we show the panel, including David in the virtual world, our appreciation for their depth of knowledge so far? And this is where you guys help them out. Because if you don't ask them a question, I do. And a couple up there know that I have spent far too long on regenerative agriculture. I'm going to shock David. I think I had Alan Savory in my car for 9 hours this summer, and we got into serious detail. But I'm not going to go there. I'm happy to take a regular question. Otherwise, I'm going to challenge them. From the title of your presentation, the thing which has always amazed me about nature is there's no such thing as waste. And what we have done as a species is actually demonstrated how much trash we have. And what Kjersti said so clearly is that we're hiding the problem and we're going to catch up with the problem. What advice would you like the audience to walk away with about the waste within the system? So David, Sonia, yes, all of you. What advice would you give the audience?
Men first in this case.
Study, reflect, cradle to cradle is such an important place to start. I know it's such a niche for so many people, but understanding that nature designs in abundance, and as you just said, we invented waste. We have to design for abundance. How do we do that? And it's clearly a systemic approach to the way our society functions, but it's a very important question today.
Thank you, David. Sanne?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a difficult question. So, of course, if we are developing new products and processes, and indeed we have the opportunity to take it from the drawing board, then definitely I would say look at the cradle-to-cradle design philosophy, be inspired by it, not bits and pieces of it, but again in the whole aspect of it. That way you're not going to create the next generation problem to solve. But with the existing materials, ways that we have at hand now, as Kjersti is saying, we really have to look very carefully how are we going to use that, because in many cases we will create an even bigger problem trying to reintroduce that into our products and processes than that we would be by maybe just putting it safe somewhere and letting it be that often toxic waste that it is. So I think it really asks all of us to look at it very closely, and definitely not just to do recycling for the sake of recycling, because again, we might just be creating the next problem.
So the first question I always ask my clients or my partners is, why are you making this product? What's this product's license to live? Is there a good reason for putting this on the market? And, well, there's always arguments for, yes, of course, this is what we need, and blah, blah, blah. But that's more mental things. And I think that's the most important question, because we do overload the planet and the systems and the industry with so much products, so much stuff. And we all know that we buy too much, we use too much, and we waste too much. So we need to reduce the volumes, both as producers and as consumers. But it's a very challenging question, the license to live. So who wants to say, I think we maybe should go out of business because what we are doing is shit. So it's tricky, but everyone should look inside themselves and ask that.
Thank you, Anna, and the panel for a very, very interesting discussion. I read an article on my feed this morning that because of the projected El Nino situation that's going to hit our farmers in the south, we're looking at about a 40% reduction in the income of wool farmers in Australia, and possibly more as we go towards South Africa and Argentina and the rest of the south. So what you're talking about here is something very close to my heart. And I remember Yassasree speaking to us in South Africa in 2014, when he said he grew up on the farm in Zimbabwe, and then thought his father is really stupid, doesn't know what he's doing. So he went off to university and came back and said, I'm going to fix this lot. And then he did it in his way, and then discovered that he was actually ruining the soil. And this is a topic that we often, I think, overlook, and that is our farmers, and specifically in the wool farming industry, and I think in cotton as well, are often fifth or sixth generation on the same land. Now, if we start talking about regenerative farming, if they don't know how to do it, who can? How can you possibly farm the same piece of land for 200 to 300 years and then be told by some certification scheme that, hey, you're not doing it right, we're going to tell you how to do it? So I'm totally behind the Yassasree land to market. I totally support what they're doing. Every piece of land is different, every farm is different, and let's not sit in an office and come up with a certification scheme that we think we're going to push down on a farmer that's been doing it for hundreds of years. And we saw the result in the Indian community, in the cotton world. We saw the suicide rate, we saw the tragedy that played out there. Let's not repeat that, and let's learn from our mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene.
I think Delena's going to be on the panel next time. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, because otherwise I'm going to get heckled by the people next to me.
Okay, one last word. What I took from all our discussion was, in terms of pattern, I was asking for patterns, is diversity, biodiversity, looking for no waste, looking for integration of different things, having no monocultures, but having diverse systems, having the time in their eyes, not a solution for just one season, but looking for multiple seasons also to have a look into unexpected outcomes of new innovation, integrating everybody who is in the system. In our case, what we talked about, animals, crops, humans, in your case, probably different product lines, and have a look on how nature does it. If we mimic nature, we are pretty safe, and nature always works with the material which is available. they don't add extra things to have more strengths, because they just do it by form, function, and whatever, but they don't add any other material to have more strengths on a tree or whatever. And if we take that as a design approach into whatever product we design, it's a chair or it's a jacket, might be a good habit. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. We are here for a few minutes. You will also find us at the sustainability area in the hall. And if there are questions coming up later, you can reach us at me at anna@grünenvoice.com, and the email address of Kjersti, Sanne, and David are also available on the Performance Days site. So thank you for your time and for listening.
Can we show our appreciation once again to Anna and her team, and especially the man in Paris. Thank you for joining us from afar.